My husband signed the divorce papers and said, "There's nothing to divide." I put the keys on the table and walked out. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The grandfather clock in the corner of the conference room struck 9 when I finished signing my name for the last time. Bradley answered his phone before the ink dried. I watched him do it, watched him pull the phone from his jacket pocket and swipe to answer with the easy reflex of a man who has stopped pretending, because pretending requires an audience worth performing for, and I had apparently ceased to qualify. "Yes, babe." His voice changed. That's the detail I want you to hold on to. His voice changed, softened, warmed, rearranged itself into something I had spent 10 years trying to find in conversations directed at me and had eventually concluded didn't exist. "I'm almost done here. Don't forget the ultrasound. Mom will meet you there." A pause, and then the sentence that settled into my chest like a stone dropped into still water. "Your baby is the heir, after all." He did not step out of the room. He stood 4 feet from the table where I had just signed away 10 years of my life and talked to his pregnant mistress in front of his lawyer, his sister, 2 aunts, and me, with the specific ease of a man who has decided the performance is over. I looked at the pen in my hand, placed it on the table, folded my hands in my lap. Brittany, Bradley's sister, 31, a woman whose primary occupation appeared to be the active management of her brother's self-image, was sitting directly across from me with a smile that she had not bothered to contain since I walked in. She leaned forward now, elbows on the conference table, and said it like she'd been saving it. "He'll be marrying a real woman soon, one who's actually carrying his son." An aunt near the window, Margaret's sister, whose name I had never successfully retained across a decade of holiday dinners, added, without looking up from her phone, "She'll come crawling back in a month. Who wants a woman with 2 kids?" Bradley ended his call, picked up the asset documents, looked at them for approximately 7 seconds. 7 seconds for 10 years of shared financial life, and tossed them back across the table. "There's nothing to divide," he said. "The penthouse is mine. The SUV is mine. The accounts are mine." He looked at me with the mild impatience of a man wrapping up a meeting that ran over. "If she wants the kids, she can take them. Less trouble for me. Less trouble for me. Connor is 7. Madison is 5. They call him Daddy, and he had just described them, in a sentence, as a quantity of trouble he was glad to be rid of. I sat with that for exactly as long as it took me to decide I was done sitting. I stood, opened my purse, reached in, and placed the penthouse keys in the center of the conference table. "These are yours," I said. Bradley smirked. It was his best smirk, the one he used when he believed he was winning, which was most of the time. "Good. You're finally learning your place." I reached into my purse again, took out 2 navy blue passports. "The children's visas were approved last week," I said. "We'll be relocating to London. The move is scheduled for this evening." The room went completely, absolutely still. It was the silence of people encountering something they had not prepared for, the silence of a calculation failing in real time. Brittany's smile didn't disappear so much as it collapsed, the structural failure of an expression built on an assumption that had just proven wrong. "You don't have money for that," she said. Her voice had lost its certainty, and she hadn't noticed yet. "You have nothing." I looked at her. "That," I said, "is no longer your concern." The office doors opened behind me. A uniformed chauffeur, navy jacket, white gloves, the whole production, stepped into the conference room and looked at me. "Miss Sarah," he said, "the car is ready." Through the lobby glass, visible from where we all stood, a black Mercedes S-Class waited at the curb with its engine running. Bradley shot to his feet. His chair rolled back and hit the credenza. "Who is paying for that?" I took my children by the hands, Connor on the left, Madison on the right, both of them quiet in the particular way children are quiet when they have learned that the rooms adults occupy require a certain stillness. And I walked out of that conference room without answering my husband's question. He did not deserve the answer yet. He would get it, but on my timeline, not his. I need to take you back 3 years, because the conference room is the end of something that started long before it and makes no sense without the beginning. My name is Sarah Ellison Park. My name, the one I was born with, the one I am returning to with considerable relief. I am 36 years old. I have a master's degree in financial management from Georgetown, 7 years of experience in corporate treasury operations before I stopped working at Bradley's request, and 2 children who are the most important people in my life by a margin so large it renders all other considerations essentially decorative. I met Bradley Park at a work function 11 years ago. He was handsome in the surface way, the kind of good-looking that photographs well and ages into authority, and he had the particular confidence of a man who has always been the most impressive person in the rooms his family put him in. He ran his father's company, Park Capital Properties, which managed a portfolio of commercial and residential real estate across 3 states. He had money and presence and a quality of focused attention that, at 25, I found compelling. I should have looked more carefully at who else he directed that attention toward. We married after 14 months. I left my position at the treasury firm. He said there was no need, that the company needed my skills internally, that I could do more good helping him build than working for someone else. I believed him because I had no specific reason not to, and because I was 26 and in love with a version of him that he sustained for approximately 18 months before it became too much effort. The first time I understood what I had married was our 2nd anniversary dinner. I had organized a private room at a restaurant we both love, arranged the table myself, planned the evening carefully. He arrived 40 minutes late, distracted, checked his phone 3 times during the appetizers, and when I mentioned the anniversary, gently once, he said, "I'm building a company, Sarah. Not everyone has the luxury of focusing on personal things." I filed it, told myself he was under pressure, told myself that building something requires sacrifice and that this was temporary. I filed a great many things over the next 8 years. The second time I understood what I had married was the evening I found a credit card statement for an account I didn't know existed, charged to Bradley's name, $17,000 over 6 months, restaurants I hadn't been to, a hotel in Chicago during a week he'd told me was a conference, a jewelry purchase from a boutique I looked up and found described as specializing in fine women's accessories. I confronted him with it in the kitchen on a Tuesday night. He told me I was paranoid. He said the card was for client entertainment. He said the hotel was a conference overflow from the main block, and if I checked the conference schedule, I'd find his name on the registration. I did not check. I put the statement back in the drawer. I told myself I believed him. I did not believe him. But the children were 3 and 1, and I was not yet ready for the truth that was waiting, patient as furniture, at the center of the life I was living. The third time, the time I stopped filing and started building a folder of my own, was 18 months ago. Bradley had been different for almost a year by then, not dramatically different, subtly. The specific micro-adjustments of a man managing 2 lives, phone face down more consistently, schedule more opaque, the occasional excuse that didn't quite join up with the previous one if you paid attention. I had been paying attention for a long time. I had been paying attention and choosing not to act on what I saw, which is a form of self-preservation that women in bad marriages understand very well, and that looks from the outside like passivity. The name Tiffany appeared first in a text notification I saw by accident, his phone on the kitchen counter, a message from a contact saved as T. Renner, vendor, that read, "Thinking about you. Tonight?" The content of that message is not ambiguous regardless of how it's labeled in a contact list. I noted the name. I did not say anything. 2 weeks later, I found her on Instagram through a sequence of searches I will not bore you with, except to say that people who maintain secret relationships are rarely as careful about digital footprints as they believe they are. Tiffany Renner, 26. She appeared in photographs at restaurants I recognized, in a neighborhood where Park Capital had a residential project, beautiful in the way that certain women are beautiful, not constructed, just naturally, effortlessly assembled. She had 4,800 followers, and no particular professional profile that explained a connection to a commercial real estate company. She also had, in a photo posted 4 months prior, what appeared to be a very early pregnancy visible in a fitted dress. I sat with that for a long time. Then I called Harrison Webb. Harrison Webb is a family law attorney with 22 years of practice and a reputation in this city that I had researched carefully before I called him. He is 54, methodical, and has the specific quality of someone who has seen every version of this story and has stopped being surprised by any of it. What distinguishes him is not his legal skill, which is considerable, but his network. Harrison knows forensic accountants, private investigators, financial crime specialists. He assembles teams. He builds cases the way architects build buildings, from the foundation up, with the structure planned entirely before the first visible element is in place. I told him everything in our first meeting, 3 hours. He took notes without expressing any particular reaction, which I found steadying. "How long do you want to take?" he asked when I'd finished. "Long enough to do it correctly," I said. "That's the right answer," he said. "People who rush this get half of what they deserve. People who wait and document get all of it." He assigned me a forensic financial analyst named Cora Simmons, 38 years old, 12 years, doing exactly this kind of work, with a client list she could not discuss, in a manner that reminded me of my best professor in grad school, demanding, precise, and genuinely interested in getting the numbers right. Cora and I worked together for 3 months before she found the first major discrepancy. Park Capital had been routing company funds, acquisition budget, operating capital, a discretionary fund Bradley controlled personally, through a subsidiary structure that existed as far as Cora could determine, primarily to obscure the flow of money. Some of it landed in operating accounts that were entirely legitimate, but a portion, $340,000 over 14 months, had moved through 2 shell entities and terminated at a residential property purchase. The property, a luxury condo in the Meridian building, 1,100 square feet, 2 bedrooms, registered to Tiffany Renner, purchased with marital funds, purchased additionally using a partial contribution from my parents, who had given us money early in the marriage for real estate investment, specifically designated for family assets, which I had disclosed in our first meeting with Harrison and which Cora had traced meticulously through the transfer records. My parents' money used to buy his mistress a home. I sat in Cora's office when she showed me the documentation, and my hands went cold, which is the physical response I have to information that is both fully expected and still devastating when it arrives in hard evidence. I held them in my lap and breathed and looked at the transfer receipts. "Is there more?" I asked. "There's more," Cora said. "There was more. The IRS component came later, and it came from a different direction. I had a contact, a former colleague from my treasury days, a woman named Renata Cruz who had moved into tax compliance consulting and who I called on a Sunday afternoon, carefully, with the specific framing of a professional inquiry rather than a personal one. I described a hypothetical structure. She identified 3 potential issues within 20 minutes of reviewing the documents I sent her. Renata introduced me to David Lim, a tax attorney with 19 years of practice who specialized in business entity compliance and had, in his previous career, spent 6 years as an IRS revenue agent. He reviewed the Park Capital structure with the particular attention of someone who knows exactly what regulators look for, because he used to be one. This isn't aggressive tax planning, he told me on our second call. This is misrepresentation of business income, improper use of corporate assets for personal benefit, and what looks like deliberate obscuring of the entity relationship to avoid disclosure requirements. What does that mean in practical terms? I asked. It means that when this goes to the IRS, and with this documentation, it should go to the IRS, the liability is substantial. We're talking potential criminal referral, not just civil penalty. I added his assessment to the folder. The folder, by October, was 73 pages of documentation plus exhibits. Harrison had reviewed it with a federal compliance specialist. Cora had certified the financial analysis. David had produced a formal tax compliance opinion. What I had was not a divorce filing. What I had was a case. Harrison filed the court injunction on a Friday. Asset freeze, all part capital accounts, all personal account connected to Bradley by the corporate structure, all family trusts. The injunction was granted by Judge Patricia Montoya, 26 years on the bench, on the basis of documented evidence of asset concealment and misappropriation of marital funds. It was designed to activate the moment I left the conference room, time to clear at 9:15 a.m., approximately when Bradley would be finishing the signing and feeling, for the last time in this story, like a man who had won. The IRS notification went out the same morning. The documentation package to Park Capital's 3 largest institutional partners, investors who had a contractual right to notification of material irregularities in the company's financial management, went out Thursday evening, sent by Harrison with a formal cover letter. The DNA inquiry had been running for 6 weeks by the time of the signing. I had retained Dr. Elaine Forsyth, a reproductive medicine specialist with 24 years of practice, currently consulting for 3 hospitals, who had reviewed the timeline of Tiffany's pregnancy based on information Harrison had obtained, and who had produced a clinical assessment that the conception date, based on reported fetal development, did not align with the timeline Bradley had described to his family. Dr. Forsyth had been careful. She was always careful. She said it 3 times in our first meeting, I am always careful. And her assessment was framed as a question rather than a conclusion. The data suggested a conception date inconsistent with the timeline. Whether that inconsistency had significance was a matter of additional testing. That additional testing had been arranged. At the Hope Reproductive Health Center, on the morning of the signing, Bradley and Tiffany were scheduled for what Bradley believed was a routine prenatal ultrasound. His mother, Margaret, had arranged to be there. She was, according to what Harrison had learned, deeply invested in the pregnancy, which she had described to at least 4 family members as the heir we've been waiting for. Brittany was also attending, which is the kind of detail that tells you everything you need to know about the internal politics of that family. I had not arranged what happened at the clinic. I want to be precise about that. The ultrasound technician runs the probe and reads the measurements and reports what the measurements say. I had not arranged the measurements. I had simply arranged that the measurements would be taken by someone thorough, on a morning when the relevant parties were all in the same room. The rest was biology. Inside the Mercedes, while the conference room was still processing the sight of my driver and the car at the curb, the driver handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, bank transfer receipts, photographs of Bradley and Tiffany at the condo closing, time-stamped, clear, both of them smiling over a set of keys, a copy of the property deed, and a screenshot of an email between Bradley and his assistant discussing how to categorize the transfer so it wouldn't flag in the quarterly review. My phone buzzed. Harrison. The injunction cleared. All accounts frozen as of 9/12. They just arrived at the clinic. I looked at my children. Connor had his head against my shoulder, half asleep despite the hour, the specific exhaustion of a 7-year-old who has been woken early and told only that we are going on a trip. Madison was pressed against the window watching the city go by. Mommy, she said without turning from the window, are we going back to the loud house? Something in my chest moved. No, sweetheart. We're going somewhere quiet with a garden. She turned and looked at me. She has Bradley's eyes, dark brown, long-lashed, and my mother's serious expression, and she is 5 years old and has already developed the specific attentiveness of a child who has learned that the adult world contains information she needs to track. Good, she said. She turned back to the window. I didn't like when Daddy yelled. I stroked her hair and said nothing. The Mercedes moved through morning traffic, heading toward the airport, heading toward the flight Harrison had booked in my name and the children's names 6 weeks ago, on a date I had chosen because it was the earliest the passports would clear, and because it gave me enough time to finish the documentation. I thought about Bradley at the clinic. I thought about the ultrasound probe running across Tiffany's abdomen, about the measurements appearing on the screen, about the doctor, a careful man, according to his clinic profile, 21 years of obstetrics, the kind of professional who measures twice because he understands the weight of what he's reading. I thought about Bradley's face when the number didn't match. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was the particular exhaustion that comes after a long, careful effort, the specific tiredness of someone who has been holding something heavy for a very long time and has just finally been allowed to put it down. My phone buzzed again at 9:47. Harrison. The doctor is reviewing. Give it 10 minutes. I gave it 10 minutes. At 9:58, his message was 3 words. Conception date confirmed. Followed by, Bradley's calling me now. Don't answer yours. Bradley called. I watched my phone light up with his name and I let it ring until it stopped. Then I texted Harrison 3 words back. Proceed as planned. I was not in the clinic. Everything I am about to tell you was reconstructed afterward. From Harrison. From a description Bradley himself gave his own attorney in a deposition 6 6 weeks later, and from Brittany of all people, who told a mutual acquaintance the whole story in what she described as a need to process it, and what functioned as a comprehensive account of her own undoing. Bradley was standing by the clinic window, the way men stand in these rooms when they want to look composed and succeeding only partially, when the ultrasound technician ran the probe the first time and said nothing, then ran it again. The doctor came in, measured again. "Mr. Bradley," he said with the specific, careful phrasing of a physician delivering information he wishes were different. "Are you certain you are the father of this child?" Bradley said, "Obviously." The doctor showed him the measurements, explained the fetal development timeline, explained, in clinical terms, what the numbers indicated about when conception had occurred, 5 weeks before the date Tiffany had given him, 5 weeks before the date that placed conception squarely within their relationship. The room went cold in the way rooms go cold when everyone in them is processing the same information at different speeds, and no one is ready to be the first to speak. Tiffany started shaking, not crying, shaking, which is a different thing. The physical response to something that cannot be managed in real time. Bradley turned to her slowly. Before she could say anything, before anyone could say anything, his phone rang. His CFO, Raymond Torres, 15 years with the company, a man whose composure Bradley had described to me once as his most valuable asset. Raymond was not composed. "Bradley, we're in free fall." His voice was audible to everyone in the room, according to Brittany's account. 3 major institutional partners just told their accounts simultaneously. Someone sent them documentation about internal financial irregularities. "I'm looking at a letter right now from Harrington Equity, and they're citing specific transfer records. They have the subsidiary structure." A notification appeared on Bradley's screen while Raymond was still speaking. "Notice of immediate asset freeze. Court order, number 2024, CV 8847. He tried his credit card at the clinic's front desk while his CFO was still on the phone. Declined. Brittany, who had followed him to the desk with her own card. "I have thought about this image many times," Brittany at the clinic front desk. Organic juice in hand, full of the morning's confidence. Tried hers. Declined. He called his private banker from the clinic parking lot. The banker confirmed it in 4 minutes. Every account, personal checking, investment accounts, corporate operating accounts, the family trust that his mother controlled, frozen by court injunction, effective 9/12 that morning, filed by Harrison Webb, Esquire, on my behalf. Bradley called Harrison from the parking lot of the Hope Reproductive Health Center, which is a sentence I have spent some time appreciating. Harrison told me about the call that evening with the precision of a man who takes notes during difficult conversations because he has learned that difficult conversations are often also evidentiary. Bradley was screaming. Harrison's voice was entirely calm. "My client kept records for 3 years, Bradley. Misuse of marital funds. Company operating capital moved into private real estate for the benefit of a third party. Transfer records connecting your corporate accounts to a residential purchase in Ms. Renner's name." A pause. "The IRS was notified this morning. The formal referral was made at 8:45. She can't." Bradley's voice, according to Harrison, lost its register for a moment. "She doesn't have access to those." "She had access to everything you gave her access to," Harrison said, "and she used it correctly. You should also know that federal investigators arrived at your office at approximately 9:30. Your assistant confirmed it. The Park Capital offices at that moment were being visited by 2 agents from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, a preliminary inquiry which Harrison had coordinated with a contact in the U.S. Attorney's Office, based on the documentation package David Lim had prepared. Bradley drove to the office. The agents were methodical and polite and had a subpoena for financial records and hard drives. His lead attorney did not return his call for 40 minutes, and when she did, it was to tell him that his retainer check, the one he had written 2 weeks ago, the one drawn on an account that was now frozen, had bounced that morning. He sat in his own conference room, the one with his grandfather's portrait on the wall, the one he'd described to me once as proof of the family legacy, and he looked at the agents moving through his files, and he sat with what was happening. He called me at 2:17 p.m. I did not answer. I was 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. Harrison arrived at the Park Capital offices at 4:45 p.m. with a settlement proposal. He told me about this later, calmly, the way he tells me everything, with precision and without drama, because Harrison understands that drama is for situations you haven't prepared for. The proposal: Bradley would sign over his remaining equity stake in Park Capital, which, after the institutional partner's withdrawal and the account freeze, was the last meaningful asset he held that wasn't encumbered by the court order. And in exchange, I would classify certain of the transfer irregularities as marital financial disputes rather than pursuing every available federal complaint. Not a gift, a negotiation. The difference between a man who loses everything in a collapse and a man who loses everything in an orderly process. Bradley stared at him. "You want my company?" he said. Harrison did not blink. "She already has it. The board met this afternoon. They voted to remove you as managing director an hour ago. The equity transfer is a formality." Bradley's phone buzzed while Harrison was speaking. He looked at the screen. A notification from the DNA testing service he had apparently arranged without telling anyone. A private paternity test. Ordered, Harrison later surmised, sometime in the 2 hours between the clinic and the office, in the specific desperate hope that the clinic measurements had been wrong. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. He sat with that for a moment. Everything he had burned his family for. Every cold silence directed at me. Every dismissal. Every evening he had come home late without explanation. And every morning he had left early without acknowledgement, and every dinner party where he had introduced me as his wife in the specific tone of a man indicating a piece of furniture. 10 years, 2 children he had just described as less trouble for him to give away. All of it. Every choice, every cruelty, every small and large act of erasure, built toward a future that included a baby that was not his and a woman who had been using him as thoroughly as he had been using me. Bradley picked up the pen. Harrison pushed the document forward, and Bradley signed. Because somewhere above the Atlantic Ocean, in seat 3A of a British Airways flight, I already had what he was signing. The house in Richmond is on a quiet street with a garden that wraps around the south side, roses along the back fence, a small lawn where Connor and Madison run circuits after school, a kitchen window that looks out onto green. I have been here 6 months. I am consulting again, part-time, selectively, in the specific mode of someone who has rediscovered the pleasure of doing work because she is good at it, rather than because someone requires her to. Cora Simmons referred my first client. Harrison referred the second. My parents came in March. My mother spent 4 days teaching Madison to make the dumpling recipe I grew up with, and 2 days arguing cheerfully with my father about the correct method, which is a form of love so specific and durable that it made me cry once, quietly, in the hallway, in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. Connor started school and made 2 friends in the first week, which is his nature. He moves toward people with an openness I find extraordinary in a child raised in a house with as much tension as ours contained. Madison has a garden section she considers entirely her own. She has planted 3 things so far. One of them appears to be growing. "Mommy," she said last Tuesday, standing at the kitchen window looking at her plot, "do you think the flowers will come before summer?" "I think they might," I said. She considered this with the seriousness she brings to most things. "I hope they're red," she said. I stood at the kitchen window beside my daughter and looked at the garden that is ours now. Not borrowed, not conditional, not subject to someone else's decision about what we deserved. And I thought about a conference room, about a pen and a set of keys placed on a table, about a man who had described 10 years and 2 children as nothing to divide, and a grandfather clock that had struck 9, and a voice that changed when it was directed at someone he considered worth performing for. He had called me nothing. He had handed me the pen and told me to sign, and he had believed, with the absolute confidence of a man who has never once had to seriously reckon with being wrong, that I would walk out of that building into the diminished life he had designed for me. I had walked out of that building into everything else. Bradley pleaded guilty to 4 counts of financial misrepresentation in November. He received a suspended sentence, 3 years of probation, and a substantial civil liability judgment. The Park Capital portfolio was liquidated to satisfy creditor claims. He and Tiffany Renner separated before the DNA results were formally filed. I know this because Harrison told me, and I filed it in the same category as all the other information about Bradley that no longer requires my active attention. Tiffany, I heard, moved back to her parents' house. I never contacted her. I had no reason to. She hadn't been the problem. He said there was nothing to divide. He was wrong about that. He divided everything. It just didn't divide the way he planned.